Question number 6 is the last question here, and it's really going to test your ability to kind of put together a lot of different pieces of information. My suggestion to you, if you can, is to try to do your best in question number 6 to tie everything together. This one is meant to be one of the harder questions. So if you're already feeling a little intimidated, I would say follow along with this video and with the answer key and use that to help you develop your thinking so that you don't have to start this question completely by yourself. I'm going to do a couple of examples and then I'm going to have you try the rest. But follow what I'm thinking as I'm saying it and why I'm saying it. And I think that should help you kind of fill in the gaps. Plus, there's an answer bank in this problem. So the process of elimination might help too once you realize you can narrow down some possible options and figure things out with a bit of common sense. But I'm going to start with number 6, letter A, because it wants us to do 3 things. First, it wants us to fill in the missing values in the table. Then it wants us to determine whether it's arithmetic or geometric. Then it wants us to write an equation, and we can match the equation or we can write our own equation. We can just decide what's easier for us. So let's start with letter A and let's think about the pattern. We don't know if it's supposed to be arithmetic or geometric. So we have to use our best common sense. We just have to try to think and think logically. If I was multiplying something, I'd have 0 times something, and then that times something would be 2. That times the same thing would be 3. Well, 2 times nothing nice is going to be 3. It'd have to be like a decimal, like 1.5. That doesn't sound logical. So let's think common sense. Can we come up with something arithmetic? 0 plus something, plus something, plus something. What about if we just naturally tapped into our instinct? It just certainly seems like 0, 1, 2, 3. Then if the pattern kept going, 4, 5. That seems like it works. It seems like it's a pattern that connects. Is it truly arithmetic? Let's find out. Would we be adding the same number each time? 0 plus 1 is 1, plus 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. It totally looks like this is working. My adder is definitely plus 1. So that means if I am adding something, I must have an arithmetic sequence. I know that for certain. It must be arithmetic because I can add the same number every time and the pattern works perfectly. Now I have to write an equation. Now you can always write your own equation if you want, or you can use the answer bank. I'll leave it up to you to decide. If you want to use your own structure for the equations because you already know this, that's fine too. You could say to yourself, well, it's arithmetic, so you need 2 pieces of information. And I'll write my arithmetic formula one more time. It's going to be the initial value plus the adder with the n. So, initial value, that's always the 0 term in the table. Initial is always the 0, so I'll just make sure I kind of highlight there. The initial value is always the 0 term in the table, so that's 0. Plus, because we're adding, 1 is the adder, so I'll put that for 1, and then n. Now, if you're looking at the answer bank saying, no, Herbert, we must be wrong. That's not in the answer bank. It is. Think common sense for a second. Which of those answers in the answer bank looks like it could be the same as having a 1, even though we might not necessarily see it, and a 0, even though we might not necessarily see it? Did you find an equation that works? So I'm looking at this one right here. It looks like that one is the same thing as having an invisible 1 and an invisible 0 that could have been in front of that 1 adding, and we would have never seen it at all. So it turns out we were correct. We can write it this way, or we can write it the way in the answer bank. Both ways make sense. And because of the way this problem is designed, I can eliminate that answer from the answer bank because I know I've used it. So that helps me narrow it down for sure. And that helps me narrow it down for other questions too. Now, I know that in other questions, I can use these as a hint, like, ooh, maybe I'll try a multiplier of a half, or dividing by 2. Maybe I'll try a multiplier of 2. Maybe I'll try an adder of -2. Maybe I'll try an adder of +6. So if I run out of ideas for something, like by myself, maybe I can use the answer bank as some ideas for patterns to try in case I need to experiment a bit. So let's try letter B and kind of use that same logic. This one, again, I don't know what to try. 32 connects me to something, connects me to 8, connects me to something, connects me to 6. I don't know what to try. But I'm going to use a bit of common sense because I'm going to notice something here. That 32 is in the initial value spot. Remember how that's like precious area right there? That n of 0 is always the initial value spot no matter what? That's giving me a huge hint. If the initial value is 32, then that means it has to appear in the equation. There's only one equation in this answer bank that has a 32. It's this first one right here. So let's think for a second. This equation might be giving me a really helpful clue. What if the multiplier was 1/2? And if you just said, Herbert, how do you know it's a multiplier? Think. It's that power of n. It's got to be geometric. Geometric means a multiplying or dividing sequence, and 1/2 is the same as dividing by 2. So maybe this is telling me to try dividing by 2. Maybe this is the clue that I needed. So 32 divided by 2 would be 16. Divided by 2 is 8. Oh, this is looking good. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. This is looking great. 2 divided by 2 must be 1. Yep, it totally worked. Thank heavens for that answer bank, because common sense totally saved the day. This is definitely a geometric pattern because we used this geometric equation to give us the hint, and because we know which equation we used, we can copy that equation straight into the space. No need to reinvent the wheel. I can cross it out of the bank to show I'm done with it. So you can tell that a little bit of common sense goes a long way, because maybe for some of these you can use that same logic. And maybe by the time you use logic on a couple of them, you'll only have 1 or 2 possibilities left, and it'll be easier to figure out the missing pieces. So don't feel like you have to do the problems in order. Don't feel like you have to do any specific part of each problem first. Just go with your gut. Use all these little clues and play detective. There's no real way to successfully play detective in a specific order that works the same way 100% of the time. If you've ever watched detective films or read detective novels, you know. Sometimes you just have to keep trying new ideas and see what sticks till you finally figure out the puzzle. So think of this like a puzzle. Try anything you can using the answer bank as your guide and see if you can figure out what's missing. If you need a clue, you can always peek at the answer key. And if you still get stuck and you need a little bit of hints, or a little bit of a hint to explain one, pop into the next office hours and I'll be glad to explain my logic in case any of these tips didn't really work for you.